Hello and good afternoon, everyone. I'm super excited to be joined here with some phenomenal people that I know and appreciate. I'm Sandra Dennis with Avancé Ensemble, and that means moving forward together in Haitian Creole. Avancé Ensemble is excited to be presenting the Not Voté series, meaning we're voting. And really, the series is to help to inform in a quick and fun way what the different roles are that people are will be responsible for if elected into office, when elected into office. So I share this space with Nancy Mateo, who's also a candidate, but also is on the Avancé Ensemble board. Um, and so we're excited to talk to these candidates specifically about their roles and what they think their role they will need to do in the roles that they're seeking to get elected in. So I'm going to pause right here. I'm going to ask everyone, share the live. Make sure that you share it with your networks, with your friends. Let's get some folks on this Sunday afternoon to join in with us. And then we're going to get started with some introductions. So give me a minute. We're going to share the lives. Make sure you all share on your platforms as well so that we can get folks to join us in this conversation. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start with I'm going to start with Miss Ruby Green. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and why this position.
Hi, everyone. If you don't know me, my name is Ruby Lenora Green. I'm actually running to be the next Broward County Public Defender. I currently work at the Broward County Public Defender's Office. I work in the Career Criminal Unit. I am from Broward County, which is a county in Florida, and I'm also from Collier City, which is also a little town in Pompano Beach, Florida. I'm one of 15 siblings, the only one to actually graduate and go to college. I'm a mother of an amazing 13-year-old. She's going to be 14 in September. And I've been working at the Public Defender's Office for almost 11 years. I actually started off in the Public Defender's Office in Jacksonville, Duval County. And then I moved down here about 8.5 years ago. I've been a supervisor and a chief of county court. And I'm running because we actually need a change at the public defender's office. You know, the public has no trust in what we do as attorneys. They actually do not believe that we have law degrees. They don't believe that we're real attorneys. And they don't believe that we work on their behalf. And I want to absolutely change that system. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you so much. And we're going to turn to Harold Pryor. Tell everyone about yourself, where you're from, and why you're running for this position.
Yes, Sandra, thank you so much. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you to members of Avancé Ensemble for having me and sharing your platform with me. My name is Harold Pryor. I'm a proud husband. I'm a proud father, proud attorney, but also I'm an unapologetically Black man. I'm just unapologetically Black. I'm running for state attorney because I've experienced the hell of the criminal justice system. I've seen the criminal justice system affect my family, Sandra, negatively. I had family members who had mental health issues and drug addiction issues, and we saw a criminal justice system treat them less than. But also I had family members who were brutally murdered and friends who were brutally murdered. And we watched the criminal justice system treat them less than because of the color of their skin and their status. And so I'm running because I truly want to change the system. I believe that we can change the system from within. It's best to do it from within. I truly believe that I'm the person for that job. I served as a prosecutor. I tried misdemeanor offenses all the way to serious felony offenses. I went into civil practice. Also served as an in-house counsel for a multi-million-dollar telecommunications company. So I have a combination of life experiences as a prosecutor and professional experience to run an office of the magnitude of the state attorney's office in Broward County. But also, more importantly, I'm a husband to an immigrant wife, and I'm also husband to a 2-year-old Black son. And my wife and I worry every day, how are we going to raise them? How are we going to bring them up in this dangerous world? And so I'm running to initiate ground level criminal justice reform while not compromising the safety of our communities. And I truly believe that the time is now, and I believe I'm the best person for that job. And so I look forward to interacting with everyone. I look forward to answering the questions and getting to the bottom of some of these issues and why I think it's important to vote in this election cycle. And to kind of close on that, I truly believe We are in a race for the soul and consciousness of Broward County. And that's why I believe this election cycle is important.
Thank you so much for that, Harold. We're going to turn over to Mr. Joe Scott. Tell the folks about yourself, where you're from, your upbringing, and why you're running for the position that you're running for, Broward Supervisor of Elections.
Absolutely, Sandra, and thanks for having me on today. So I come from a service-oriented family. I grew up with Grandma Carey, who was the first Black woman to vote in Wilcox County, Alabama. So I learned about how important it is to fight voter suppression at a very early age. My mother was an educator for over 40 years and retired from Broward County Public Schools. My father was a sergeant major in the Army, retired from the Army as a sergeant major. And I have always been very into community service, public service. I've been a member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity for 14 years. And I am running for Supervisor of Elections because, like many people out there, I see the problems that we have in our election system. And I feel like there's just this sort of a missing skill set that we see whenever you see the problems that happen. When you look at Georgia, Iowa, or even here in Florida, a lot of times we have technology failures, people trying to hack our system. And we don't have people who work in those offices who are really equipped to handle those challenges. So I actually studied computer science at West Point, and I work for a Global 500 technology company where I partner with government agencies and help them improve their cybersecurity as well as their efficiency and sustainability. I have the exact skill set that a supervisor of elections for the future is going to need. Someone who can come in and integrate complex systems into complex organizations, make our voting system easier for folks to use. You know, that's really what we need a supervisor of elections for, to put the right systems in place that will allow this system to work seamlessly, make it easy, make sure that our community has trust in the system and has faith that they can go vote, that their vote's going to be counted, and that they have a role to play in our system. And I know that our community needs that champion, and I believe I can be that champion that will increase our voter participation.
Thank you, Mr. Joe Scott. And we're going to turn over to Ms. Melba Pearson, who's actually running in Miami-Dade County. So Avancé Ensemble actually does work in Miami-Dade County and Broward. We're still trying to figure out Palm Beach. Palm Beach can seem a little far, but we're here for the Haitian community all throughout the South Florida community, making sure that we have the information we need to be able to make informed decisions at the ballot. So take it away, Ms. Melba Pearson.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again, Sandra, Nancy, for sharing this platform with me. Ça passe, and I'm super looking forward to the discussion this afternoon. My name is Melba Pearson, and I'm running to be the next state attorney for Miami-Dade County, Florida. A little bit about me. I was a prosecutor here in Miami-Dade County for close to 16 years. I handled everything from misdemeanors to double homicides, and I ended my career as a prosecutor as a supervisor in the career criminal robbery unit, handling some of those really serious cases. I also was a past president of the National Black Prosecutors Association, where I really got a bird's eye view looking around the country as to best practices in the criminal justice system and what true criminal justice reform can look like that's effective and that's safe and that could really be implemented here in Miami-Dade County. I spent the last 3 years as the deputy director of the ACLU of Florida, where I was so proud to work on Amendment 4, which returned voting rights to people with criminal convictions, as well as working on criminal justice reform around the state and in Tallahassee, especially when it came to different bills that were proposed over the various sessions while I was in that capacity, and also working on police practices and that lack of accountability for law enforcement that has really been plaguing our communities and has dominated the discussion, and rightfully so, in the last few weeks. And on a personal side, I am a proud daughter of the Caribbean. I'm a first-generation American. My father is from Jamaica and my mother was from Trinidad. And I have lived here in Miami for actually Election Day on August 18th will make a full 23 years that I've been living in Miami. I'm originally from New York, as many people from the Caribbean. You either land in New York, Toronto, or Miami, right? So that's where my family landed, and I migrated down here to have the opportunity to make a living life and make a difference. So yeah, that's about me, and I really look forward to digging in on these issues.
Thank you so much, Melva. I want to kind of shout out Nancy, who's going to be providing some tech support. If there are any comments, any questions that you all need have, please drop them in the chat, and we can make sure that the conversation continues to flow. Also, want to be very transparent in terms of why Avance Ensemble is hosting these candidates. We are a Black people. This is not a debate. Most folks here, they're not running against each other. We thought it to be fair and to be right, to while a lot of us may not have the dollars to support them in big ways, we can always share our platforms with people who look like us to make sure that their messages are being to make sure that their messages are being shared with the community. We understand that money doesn't buy votes, that people vote. And so oftentimes money doesn't get us in the spaces all the time that we need to be in, but we can provide these folks, our folks, opportunities to share their platform, our platform with our people to make sure that the messages are getting out. These are people that we know. These are folks that we've worked with, we've seen in the community. They look like us. A lot of them have the values that we have. This is also just to be transparent. I've been saying some has not endorsed any candidates, but we do think it to be really fair to make sure that we share our platform with these amazing individuals. So I want to definitely put that out there and make sure that we know that as a community, we definitely have to support our own in any way that you can. And so we're going to go right into the conversation because I want to really get people to understand, like when folks are talking about the government and the roles that so many folks are going to see on the ballot this August and this November, many folks take it for granted that in immigrant communities that if you weren't here in 8th grade, you missed government. And so you may not actually know. And even if you were here, like me, I grew up here, you may not remember, like, what are these roles responsible for? What do they actually do? When folks are saying, Breonna Taylor, we want these folks arrested, who can really make that happen? What does the Supervisor of Elections actually do? Making sure that folks understand the power of the state attorney and judges as well. And so let's make it really plain and make it really clear so that folks can really understand what the roles are and why we need specific types of folks with skill sets in these roles. So I'm going to go in the opposite direction. We're going to start with Melba. Tell us about the state attorney. And I know, Harold, you're going to talk about it too. If you can really pinpoint as well for us what specific things you're seeing in the counties that you're working for so we can differentiate. What are you seeing in your county, Melba, Miami-Dade County? And then when we get to Harold, specifically in Broward County, that folks need to be paying attention to in terms of the state attorney role. So why don't we start with you, Melba? Tell us about the state attorney role. What do the state attorneys do? What's the day-to-day life of a state attorney? Make it plain because folks, they say start at a 3rd grade level or 8th grade level. That's how plain we want to make it this afternoon.
All right, sounds good. I think I can do it. All right. So what a prosecutor does on a day-to-day basis is that, number one, they decide whether or not charges are going to be filed against someone. What level of charge, right? So let's take murder, because everybody's kind of a little bit familiar, at least from movies and things like that. Is it 1st degree murder? Is it 2nd degree murder? Is it something else, right? And then also, what type of pleas should be extended, right? So you get charged with a crime. Is the plea going to be a really long sentence? Or are they going to be looking at, well, maybe you can go to a program. Maybe you could go to diversion. Maybe you just do some community service hours and the case, gets dismissed against you. So sort of like what level of resolution is available? And then lastly, if you go to trial, what types of sentences are the prosecutors going to be asking for once a person is convicted and suggesting to the court, listen, this is what we think is appropriate? Is it always going to be the maximum? Is it going to be a minimum mandatory? Or is there some wiggle room? So a prosecutor really sets policy around what the criminal justice system is going to look like in a specific county. So let me just give you a bigger example that to me really pinpoints what's going on in our criminal justice system.
1 second,
So,
Melba.
I'm sorry?
A prosecutor, state attorney, same position.
Yes. So let me clarify that. That's a really great point. So here in Florida, our prosecutors are called state attorneys, right? So the elected prosecutor is the state attorney, and then all the folks that work for the state attorney are called assistant state attorneys, right? Now, if you're in New York, the phrase is called district attorney. Same role, just different title. If you're in Virginia, it's Commonwealth attorney, right? But it's all the same job. And then, of course, if you're in Illinois, they do states with an apostrophe as opposed to just state. But exact same job, just slightly different title, depending where you are in the country, right?
Thank you, making it plain.
Making it plain. We're gonna make it plain. So let me give you one really plain example that I think will bring it home for everyone. So as we've been examining and protesting and just being enraged over these murders of Ahmaud Arbery, of Breonna Taylor, of George Floyd, Elijah McCain, so many others, right? As we're looking at those murders, we're all like, really mad, and we're like, we want to see charges filed. Well, the key person in all of those cases is the prosecutor. We saw in the Ahmaud Arbery case how the case went through 3 prosecutors, and each of them kind of did their own little part to harm the case, right? And now it's in the hands of a 4th prosecutor. We're upset over the Breonna Taylor case that no one's been arrested, yet the attorney general who is in charge of handling the case is having a wonderful engagement party and not really thinking about this particular case and the fallout and the fact that this family is not receiving justice. That prosecutor is elected, right, and answers to the people. When we look at the George Floyd case, that case initially started off as a 3rd-degree murder. A different prosecutor got involved and then bumped it up to 2nd-degree murder. So when people think, well, I don't get arrested, I have no business with the state attorney, actually, yes, you do. Because if you're looking at these cases and if you're offended and upset by the outcomes, you have to think about whether or not the person you elected is really fighting for justice in a way that's aligned with your values. And in Miami-Dade County, we've had a number of these excessive force police killings. And we have a situation where the person I'm running against, my opponent, has never filed charges against a police officer in her entire 27 years for an on-duty killing. So we look at Darren Rainey, which was a horrible case we could talk about later on. But these are some of the things, like as people are looking at Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, don't forget to look in your own backyard to hold your elected official accountable when it comes to the criminal justice system.
That is amazing. Thank you so much for making it plain, for breaking that down. I'm asking questions just so that I know folks may not ask questions. So I'm going to continue to go there if we're using terminology that folks may not know are the same kind of roles. Thank you for that, Melba. I want to turn to Joe Scott because I am a longtime resident, born and raised in Broward County. And there was a whole lot of stuff that happened with the supervisor of elections in Broward County for the past few elections. We can't get things counted, what's going on. So tell us about the role of the supervisor of elections. What is that role? What are they responsible for? And specifically in Broward County, what's happening? Because we know something needs to happen in that office. So tell us a little bit more about what is happening in the supervisors of elections office.
Yeah, and I'm actually surprised because I talk to people every day, as part of running for office, and I've run into so many people they ask me questions like, is it a full-time job, or you just have to run the election every 4 years? And it's like, no, wait, there's a lot more to it. For one thing, there's a lot of elections that go on within the county. The presidential comes around every 4 years, but on those off-year elections, we oftentimes are electing a governor or a senator. Plus, you have all the countywide and local elections that are going on, and then even at the city level. And some of the cities in Broward County have their elections at different times. So it is a continuous operation where there are elections going on probably at least every 6 months or so. Now, besides doing the elections, the supervisor of elections is responsible for maintaining the voter rolls, which is something you probably hear a lot about if you've ever heard anybody use the expression about purging the voter rolls. And basically what that has to do with how do you run that process of making sure that the people who are supposed to exit the voter rolls exit, people who have died or people who've moved away. But at the same time, you don't want to have policies in place that cause people who are active voters to get removed from the voting rolls, because that'll impact certain things. When people try to go to vote and they may not get all the notifications, they don't get the sample ballot in the mail. There's lots of things that can happen as a result of people being removed from the voter rolls when they shouldn't be. And also, the supervisor of elections has an opportunity to make a lot of decisions that can either drive up our voter turnout by making it really easy for people to participate, or you can drive that voter turnout down by making it difficult. And one thing we see in our country is that there really is one party that seems intent on making sure fewer people vote, and there's one party that really wants everybody to vote. And that's really what, what the choice is in these elections. We're saying, hey, we want to open up the franchise to everybody out there. We want to make sure it's easy. We want the system to be simple. We want everybody to be comfortable with the system, which means things like we need to make sure that when we communicate, we're communicating in more than one language, because America does not have an official language. And we need to make sure that we're communicating in the languages that the voters feel comfortable communicating in. If they want their ballot to be in Spanish, if they want their communications in Spanish, we need to have that. If we want to have it in Creole, we need to have that. And I think I'm taking a big step in my campaign. I'm the only person I've seen so far. Somebody might have copied me, but I actually have Spanish and Creole messages built into my website right now. If you go to electjoescott.com, you can see that. And it's just, I did that just to show what my dedication would be to making sure that Americans who are comfortable speaking other languages feel just as comfortable participating in our system as the Americans who speak English. Because after all, we're all Americans, right? So that, and that's the ideological difference that comes in when you get the right supervisor of elections in there. You need somebody who's really focused on serving those communities and making sure that everybody's able to help out or be part of the process. You're on mute, Sandra.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Joe. So some folks think that the supervisor election is only in presidential years. We know that there are elections happening every year in different parts of the year. We know that they're not only dealing with elections, but they're also helping folks to make sure that they're registering the vote. So updating registrations, making sure that their information going out in the community. I know the supervisor of elections office also does outreach. And so there's so many things that we should know in terms of what these roles are. We're going to turn to Mr. Harold Pryor, my fellow Gator alum. Actually, in Creole, we like to say my condisciple. We were classmates. We were at school together. I'm so proud of you to see you running. I have to shout you out. And I also want to say, 3 of us are also New Leaders Council alumni. And yes. So it's such phenomenal to see Black folks doing amazing things in the communities that we represent. 4 of us. Yeah, you're right. Thank you, Javon, for that. 5 of us. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can count. So, Harold, talk about what's happening in Broward. Melba gave so many great examples. Tell us about the position in Broward, what we're seeing, what we should be paying attention to. And if you have examples, that would be great too, because I know there's some specific examples in Miami, and I'm sure there's some in Broward.
Well, first and foremost, go Gators. And Rattlers too. I love the Rattlers too. Go Gators. I think someone here is with the other school up there in Tallahassee. But we won't turn that into this. Hey, I will say this. I'm going to yield my time to Melba because she did a wonderful job. I'm joking, but Melba is awesome. Melba is one of the great examples of a progressive candidate for state attorney. She's a living and shining example and embodiment of what I think a progressive state attorney should be. And so I look forward to working with her when we're both elected. And so I want to piggyback on some of the things that Melba has said, particularly in the criminal justice system. All due respect to the sheriff candidates and the current sheriff now, the chief law enforcement officer in any given circuit. We make the final decision on filing decisions in any given alleged criminal conduct or criminal act in any given circuit. And so it's a very important role and function that the state attorneys serve in any county or circuit throughout the state. Here in Broward County, we've had the same state attorney for the last 40 plus years. And, look, anyone, I don't care your political leaning or what side of the aisle you're on, if you're Democrat or Republican, 40 years is a long time to actually serve a community. But with that said, there have been some changes that have been timely made. There have been policies that have adversely affected Black and brown folk. I truly believe that if you're going to be a state attorney, if you're going to sit in any of these elected functions, public defender, state attorney, sheriff, supervisor of elections, you have to truly understand that we have institutions in the United States of America, in the state of Florida, in Broward County, that have racism pretty much ingrained in the social fabric of these institutions, particularly in the criminal justice system. To be the state attorney in Broward County or any circuit, you have to fundamentally understand that we have a criminal justice system that has been traditionally stacked against people of color and poor people. If you have to acknowledge that. And so we have to understand that there are policies that we can enact as state attorney to ensure that we create that balance that should have been there, right? And so when you look at law enforcement, when you look at police, why was it started? If you look at the history of police, it was started to serve as slave enforcement, right? To keep slaves in check during slavery time, right? And so then you see the evolution of police and law enforcement in this country to what it is now, and not much has changed. And so we have to have a state attorney that understands that there are certain crimes, there are certain charges, there are certain offenses that people probably shouldn't be going to prison for. My goal as state attorney in Broward County is to not criminalize poverty, right? We shouldn't be putting people in prison or for drug addiction issues, right? Or putting people in prison who have mental health issues. We actually should be expanding therapeutic and problem-solving courts to actually get these people the help that they need. For low-level offenses regarding drug offenses, these people need help. We shouldn't be putting people in prison just because of drug addiction issues. My issue is with the criminal justice system and what we've traditionally seen in the criminal justice system. If you had a high conviction rate, you were seen as an ideal prosecutor, right? If you had a low conviction rate, you were seen as a terrible prosecutor. And so the metric and the system that we use to value our prosecutors is heavily flawed. Prosecutors are taking cases to trial based on wrong perceptions on how a good prosecutor is supposed to conduct themselves in the criminal justice system. You're amping up offers just so you can take something to trial to get your numbers up. We need to take that level or valuation of how we value our prosecutors out of the criminal justice system. And our only valuation and metric system should be justice, fairness, and equality. How do we do that, Sandra? I think truly we need to invest in software where we can evaluate our prosecutors on an annual basis. But also, we don't just keep that software and that information to ourselves, close to our hilt. We have to share that information with the public. We have to have an open and transparent process so the public can hold me, Melba, and other state attorneys around the country accountable for our actions. There's software out there where I can evaluate a prosecutor and say, hey, what is this prosecutor doing? What is your offer in any given case? What is the sentencing? What is the disposition or the final resolution of the case when we talk about disposition of the case? And so we can look at that information of a prosecutor. Let's say we have a prosecutor that has 250 to 300 cases. We can evaluate each of those cases and see how a prosecutor is offering, presenting offers in those cases, and looking at the resolution of those cases across demographical lines. If you're Black, white, Hispanic, male, or female. I think that's important because that's a way we can generate trust with the public and showing them that we're really true about this thing that we call criminal justice reform. And my slogan is, I want to initiate ground level criminal justice reform while not compromising the safety of our communities. And so I think the first starting point in any state attorney's office, any prosecutorial office throughout the state, throughout the country, is you have to restore accountability. And I think that's the starting point to creating any type of reform that you're going to do in this thing we call criminal justice.
Thank you so much, Harold. We're going to turn over to Ruby as well. Ruby is running for public defender. First and foremost, I think, tell us about the public defender. Tell us the difference between the public defender and the state attorney. Chime in of the state attorneys, because I think that's one of the questions we continue to get. People don't understand the differences. So tell us, and how you work together. Go ahead.
Right. No, I think that this platform, so, Sandra and Nancy, thank you so much because it's very important. And we've been seeing this now more than ever, how much the criminal justice system is important, especially for people of color. And right now, we're in the midst of two pandemics, one for COVID-19 and one is a fight against racial inequities. And we've seen this in the criminal justice system. And we already know that the criminal justice system was not built for the poor and it was not built for people of color. It was not. And anyone who says this, can go fly a kite because we know it was not. Then was born the public defenders. And a lot of people mixes up the public defenders and the state attorneys. And it's crazy because the premises in which a public defender was born was to protect those who could not afford a private attorney. And then it got around to the point where, somebody, I guess, found out that, public defenders are being paid by the state. And so they said that, oh, they're now working for the state attorneys as well. They're not protecting us. They're not fighting for our rights, but they're actually working for the state. And that's not necessarily true. And a public defender, and I'm going to use these words interchangeably because Melba explained that well in the beginning when she was talking about the state attorneys and the assistant state attorney. But the public defender is the politician, right? It's the position in which I'm running for. But I'm not claiming that it should be just a politician spot. It should be you are representing the public. You are representing the poor. You are representing indigent individuals. The people who are actually working underneath the public defender are called assistant public defenders, kind of like the state attorney and the assistant state attorneys here in Florida. That's what we're called. And public defenders have gotten a bad rep, right? They've gotten that they don't work for the clients, as I already previously explained. They got that they weren't real attorneys, and they got that they don't even work for the clients. And it's such a shame. And we need to change that. We need to change the overall view of how public defenders are seen. I've seen people pay tens of thousands of dollars to private attorneys, tens of thousands of dollars, money that their families had to scrape up, money that their family had to put their houses on in order to protect their own family members. And then no work is done on their cases. But yet they would rather, scrape up whatever little money that they have just to get a private attorney and sit in jail for 2 years or 3 years or 4, or however long it could be, just because they couldn't fathom getting a public defender because they don't believe that a public defender is going to protect them. And we have an amazing public defenders that work at our office. We do. Our trial stats at our office are, second to none. I can tell you that. I work there. I'm one of the only candidates on the ballot that's actually working in the trenches, going to trial, in court, visiting clients at the jail. One of the only ones. So I know the stats of our office. I know we have really good attorneys that work at our office. But the problem is whether or not they're overworked and underpaid. And that's the truth. We are. We have tons of attorneys in the office and staff that had to take on second jobs. They had to do the work of a public defender, and normally public defenders go to court in the mornings, and they're in court probably half of the day. Then they leave court, and then, if they get to have lunch, they may not sometimes. They have to rush right into depositions in the afternoon. They have to file motions. Sometimes they have to go to court again in the afternoon and argue those motions. They have to go to trial. Sometimes they're in trial for weeks at a time. And that takes up a lot of the time that they could be doing working on other cases. And we as public defenders, we act as several things for our clients. We act as their social workers, their case managers, their aunts, uncles. They call us asking for questions about, whether or not, they can get medications prescribed. We're their doctors. Like, it's so many roles that we take on as public defenders that people don't understand. And we need assistance. So when I become public defender, I'm going to change all of that. I'm going to make sure that we have some social workers in our office. We have one for our juvenile, but we don't have it for felony attorneys. We don't have it for misdemeanor attorneys. And these are the people that really need it, because we need to make sure that our clients are not going in and out of custody and creating that revolving door. We need to make sure that we as a society are putting in measures that's going to protect them and make them become productive members of society. They need more access to mental health beds, more access to substance abuse treatment programs. They need more access to jobs and schooling, because let's face it, a lot of the crimes that we're seeing now, people taking little things out of Walmart or Target. First of all, not only is Walmart and Target getting these items back because they have some great loss prevention officers that are stopping people in their tracks. Why are we seeing people charged with, items such as baby formula and stuff like that when they're actually getting these items back? And, it's just crazy. These are the types of situations that we're seeing that we as a society can help out. So that's the things that I see that, I can do as the public defender. And we most certainly can change the game insane. Nobody at the public defender's office is fighting for criminal justice reform. I intend on going to Tallahassee and making sure that we're fighting for criminal justice reform, because we've seen that our clients are being sentenced 3 times as much as their white counterparts for the same crime. And that's been crazy. We've seen mandatory minimums being used disproportionately. We have cases at our office that someone has a burglary dwelling for taking a mango out of a tree. And I'm like, I love mangoes. As a kid, I went to everybody in their mama's tree and took a mango off the tree, And so, to see that someone's facing a mandatory minimum of 15 years for that, it's absolutely insane. We should not have anything like that. And it goes to, the prosecutors, we need to make sure that we have people that understand that, your situation may not be my situation. Okay. Everybody grows up differently. Everybody didn't grow up with a silver spoon in their mouths. And, this is just it. We just need criminal justice reform. And I see that everybody on here is willing and ready to have that.
Thank you so much, Ruby. I don't think you know what you just did for the Haitian community there. Because listen, mango season is a real season. And I know all Black folks, all Caribbean folks, and I be seeing them in these people communities, checking out their trees. And I'm like, Mommy, Poppy, you don't want to do that? Because you could be in Ruby's office. So that was like a real call to action. Like, that is not your tree. Don't mess with those people mangoes. But I would also say that for folks, just to make it plain, I think public defenders, for folks who don't have a lot of money for attorneys, public defenders are the ones who are the attorneys for them. And I think, we want to also get away from not having a lot of money. Like, these are folks who went to law school, who really, love the community, and they've decided to be public defenders. And so what does it look like for us to have someone who understands the needs of the communities in this specific role? Thank you all so much for answering that question. Nancy's going to take the next question.
Yeah, so I just want to keep the conversation flowing, and we are getting some great dialogue in the chat. And so the first question is from the chat, and it's really geared to the state attorneys on this panel. It says, can someone please explain the passing off of cases from prosecutors to prosecutors? What is that about?
Yeah, I'll take a crack at it, and then I'll give it over to Melba. That's a common occurrence when you have a huge turnover. It's several factors, right? One could be a turnover rate. Prosecutors are quitting because they're not making enough money, right? That's one of the reasons why I left the office. It was one of the reasons why my wife left the office. We were first generation in our families to go to college or go to graduate school. And so you have exorbitant amount of debt, right? And so you have the tough decision of, do I feed my family or do I continue to do my dream job, right? To actually help the community, which we thought we were doing as prosecutors. And so you have a high turnover rate because you have to pay your student loan debt, you have to pay your mortgage or rent, and you have to eat, right? So then you have a lot of, and that's both in public defenders' offices and state attorneys' offices around the country. That's a constant discussion that state attorneys and PDs are having on an everyday basis. How do we keep and retain our prosecutors? And so that's a goal of mine. That's, recruiting and retaining talented prosecutors that actually reflect the communities that they serve and understand the communities they serve. Another reason for turnover or change of files or changing of the guard from one state attorney to another is due to promotions, right? You have a lot of state attorneys that may go to different units, or they're moving up or going somewhere else. And so that memory, or the what you call that institutional memory regarding a particular file, is no longer there, because it's a quick turnover. When you have one prosecutor leaving to go to private practice, then that other prosecutor is bumped up or promoted. And then another prosecutor might not know what the heck is going on is now taking over that file. And that could adversely affect, right? Or that can negatively affect that person who the charges are being brought against. The problem, another issue with that, is that all our prosecutors, even public defenders, they have a large caseload. There are prosecutors with 250 to 500 cases. There's one point I had about 550 cases. That's humanly impossible really to manage as one attorney, right? And so why do we have those cases? Well, I'll tell you, in Broward, I can only speak to Broward, we're known for filing every damn thing, right? We overcharge. We're notoriously known about that. That's our thing here in the state of Florida and throughout the country. I remember going
overcharge.
So I'm sorry, yes, overcharge. So we will, for example, There's a crime where you could probably charge it for third degree, and then third degree, which is, you know, the maximum penalty, third degree felony, the maximum penalty of that is 5 years in prison, right? We might look at that particular case or those given facts of that case, and we might overcharge it and say, you know what, that's a second degree. Or we might tag a second degree and a third degree and other subsequent misdemeanor charges to it, when you could probably just attach that third degree charge or not file it at all if the facts aren't there. So that's what we mean by overcharging a particular case. And so you have a situation in Broward where we're notorious for overcharging. We file a lot of cases, and so we have a lot of cases in our case count. My goal as state attorney is to not criminalize poverty. My goal as state attorney is to limit a person's interaction with the court system. Now, when we talk about felonies, you know, those make up actually a small fraction of the criminal justice cases that we have. A large number of the cases that take up these criminal dockets are misdemeanor cases, right? A lot of these misdemeanor cases are related to crimes of poverty, right? Or allegations of crimes of poverty, right? So we're deciding to charge people for petty thefts. We're charging people for driving while license suspended because of some failed financial obligation. We're charging people with misdemeanor weed cases, misdemeanor possession of cannabis cases, 20 grams or less, right? Or possession of paraphernalia cases. My goal is to not charge those cases. If you're caught with 20 grams of weed or less, we're not charging it. I find that my research has found that when you don't charge certain traffic offenses, when you don't charge certain misdemeanor possession of drug cases and paraphernalia cases, you'll notice the caseload and the case count fall down substantially. And so that's one way that we can kind of fix the criminal justice system and lower the caseload. And also expanding diversion programs. If you just expand diversion programs and problem solving in therapeutic courts, you limit people's access to the court system.
What's diversion?
So diversion, thank you. So diversion program gives someone an opportunity. So normally in a criminal justice system, I'm just going to keep it simple. Let's say if Harold Jr. is walking down the road and he commits, let's say disorderly conduct, right, which is a misdemeanor offense. It's his first time offense. It's brought before the court. Most jurisdictions would allow Harold Jr. to get that case diverted, which essentially allows you to go into court, you do community service hours or whatever the condition is, you come back, that case is dropped. For other serious offenses, it may allow that person to get a withhold and not an adjudication. But for the most part, how it's supposed to work, before it goes into the court system, that case is dropped, right? If you meet certain conditions that are placed upon you by the court and the state attorney's offices. And so to get back to the question so I can finish, so I can let Melba, add in, because I know she's ready. The reason, so that's why, Nancy, you have a lot of turnover. You have a lot of changing of files. And so to get to the main point is we have to lower the case count, right? So people aren't negatively affected when you have a state attorney who decides, okay, I'm promoted or I'm leaving the office, and it doesn't negatively affect one of Ruby's clients, right? Because I know Ruby has stories upon stories where you have a changeover from a prosecutor, and all these prosecutors aren't paying attention to their files because they have 300 to 500 cases, right? They don't remember what they may have promised this particular defense attorney, or they may have done the work. You might have one state attorney who's avid, they're on it, they're working hard, they're doing the groundwork, they're doing the behind the scenes work. Then you might get a prosecutor that might not be so, active or actively involved in the case. And they may have a different philosophy in the case. And so that goes to training as well. So that one, my fix for that is to lower the case count so prosecutors can pay more close attention to the cases. But also we have to have a training component. We have to adequately train our prosecutors to understand these situations, to understand these cases. So if in fact a case is transferred to another prosecutor, it's not going to affect someone's livelihood. If the facts are there, to drop a case, if the facts are there to drop a charge or lower a charge, we have adequately trained prosecutors that can look at these facts or the factors of a particular case, and it won't negatively affect someone. But that's just the casualty of the criminal justice system. With there being so many cases, there's going to be a turnover, and there's going to be transferring of files from prosecutor to prosecutor.
Thank you, Harold. Melba.
Yeah, so definitely I co-sign everything that Harold said, but just want to put two other perspectives on it. Number one, because of the high caseload, which is experienced not only by state attorneys, but also by public defenders, the court system as a whole, cases take a very long time to get to trial. It is not abnormal to see felony cases linger in the system for 2 to 3 years. And in the case of homicide, sometimes as long as 5 and 6 years. So obviously during that time, again, life circumstances happen, people move on, people resign. And so because of the length of time, you end up with the turnover situation. So again, that's why it's so critical to reduce the caseloads so that, number one, these cases can be handled by all portions of the court system in a faster manner. So then that minimizes the amount of turnover, because again, the longer you have, the higher likelihood of turnover. But if it's a shorter time frame where the cases get resolved, then you're more likely to have the same assistant state attorney and assistant public defender throughout the entire case. And then one last point is that there's a system, it's kind of a little in the weeds, so I'm going to try to make it plain, but there's a system called horizontal prosecution versus vertical prosecution. So horizontal prosecution means one person gets the case, they look at it, they decide whether or not charges should be filed. Then it's passed on to another prosecutor to then be able to look at it for the trial stage and handle it from there. So the case ends up getting passed off along the line to different prosecutors. The vertical model means that I look at the case, I decide what charges are going to be filed, and I keep that case until the case is over, right? Many large offices adopt the horizontal model just because of sheer volume, right? But there are ways to really get back to that vertical model, because it's better, because again, you know what you were thinking when you filed the case, right? You knew what the problems were, you knew where additional investigation was needed, and you developed a relationship with the victim or the survivor or the family members involved. You may have a rapport with the defense attorney, you know, and maybe had started certain discussions. So that's why it's really important for the same prosecutor to handle the entire case for as long as possible, right? So that's why if we reduce the caseloads, then it makes it easier for one prosecutor to keep that case from start to finish, which will result in better outcomes for the community, as well as, you know, for the individuals who are impacted, both the defendant and the person who survived the incident. Because at the end of the day, the goal of a prosecutor is equal justice, right? So that means making sure that, you know, the pleas or the outcomes are similar. So it's not about one group of people, whether because of race or because of economic means, get one set of outcomes, and another set of people get something totally different. So
thank you for that. We're going to do like a popcorn style, because I think that this is such a great conversation. I'm learning a lot. People are saying they're learning a lot. So thank you all so much. I want to popcorn it in terms of, for Joe, we know elections are coming up. We're in a pandemic right now. What's happening with that? So that's your question, Joe. We're going to turn to Ruby and talk about, dig a little deeper in what folks are experiencing in terms of the disparities that you're seeing in groups. When you're talking about the folks that come into who need public defenders, what kinds of folks are those? Why are they experiencing what they're experiencing? That's Ruby's question. We're going to come to Melba, because you mentioned something earlier, and I want to dig deeper. You said for 27 years, as long as the current state attorney in Miami-Dade County has been in the position she has in charge. What do you think is happening right there? Like, you know, why shouldn't she have been, you know, charging these kinds of cases? And to Harold, I want to speak about why you think there's been the same the state attorney in Broward for this many of years. So we're going to popcorn it. Everyone has their questions. We're going to start with Joe.
Yeah, so 2020 has turned out to be a pretty interesting year. I think everybody would agree with that, right? There's a couple of things going on. One is that COVID-19, especially here in Broward County, is worse than it's ever been. And I encourage everybody to use our vote by mail system. Now, I'm finding that a lot of people don't trust our vote by mail system. But I'll tell you, I actually used the vote by mail system here in Broward County when I was in South Korea in 2006 and when I was in Iraq in 2008. I know my ballots made it back and were counted. because I was able to go on and verify. And we have great systems in place to do all of that verification now. And I would encourage everybody to stay safe, stay home, and vote by mail this year. And when I get there, I'm actually going to improve that vote by mail system by making it easier for people to track their ballot from the point of when they request it. We're going to give people reminders to make sure they actually fill out those ballots and send them back. And we're going to send you notifications. If it's too late, we're going to let you know. Don't mail it. It's too close. You can go to an early voting site, or you can go to election day. The one thing I want everybody to know is, number one, you all have a right to vote by mail if you're a registered voter here in Broward County. And number two, it doesn't limit your options at all. You get your vote by mail ballot. You can fill that ballot out in the privacy of your home and take it to an early voting site if you want to, or you can still go vote on election day. Now, if you send off your ballot in the mail and then the elections office never receives that ballot, and you go on to check and they never received it, people ask me, what do I do then? You go to your polling place on election day and you vote on a provisional ballot. And if your other ballot, the mail ballot, does not show up at the elections office before the deadline, they'll use that provisional ballot instead. So you really have all of the options available when you do that. Now, the other thing that's big this year is obviously our community is really motivated about criminal justice reform. But I'm surprised at all the, especially young Black people that I talk to, who don't have a registration with a specific party. And the fact of the matter is that our criminal justice system is on the ballot on August 18th. And you need to be registered with the party of the candidate that you want to support. If you want to support Harold Pryor to be your state attorney, you're not going to be able to help him if you're not registered Democrat. And that's the same for me, and it's the same for Ruby. Okay, that you'll have the judges will be on your ballot, the school board will be on your ballot. But if you have some kind of, you don't like the Democratic Party and you don't want to register Democrat, you are giving away your opportunity to have your voice heard in this election, because we need your help and we want you to be there. And I know I'm probably preaching to the converted on this particular call, but I bet all of you who are listening to me right now have a cousin or have a friend or have somebody who's in your life who doesn't want to register. I want to be independent. I want to be no party affiliation. Okay, well, guess what? You don't get to pick who your sheriff's going to be. You don't get to pick your state attorney. You don't get to pick your public defender, because those races are going to be decided in the Democratic primary on August 18th. And if you're not registered Democrat, you're not part of it.
Y'all dropping some facts. And I just like the vibe. I mean, for folks who are registered as independents, you don't get to vote on these things while they do have impact on your lives. And I don't think that's fair. I think we should be able to vote and make sure that we can vote for the folks who have an impact on our lives. So do what you need to do in order for you all to make the best decisions for you and your families. Joe, I also want to talk about, some folks don't really understand vote by mail. So let's say vote by mail. My understanding is Broward County is sending out ballots to everyone. Is that what's going to happen?
No, so we can't just send ballots to people. They have to request a vote by mail ballot. So if you go to browardsoe.org, there's currently a pop-up box that'll come up immediately that you can go in and request your vote by mail ballot, and then you'll get one. But no, it's not automatic. You have to request it.
That's some trickery, because I know there was a lot of talk around COVID and folks automatically getting vote by mail ballots in the mail. So thanks for clearing that up.
And I mean, that's absolutely something that we should, especially this year, we should be doing that. But like I mentioned in my earlier statement, the people who control our election system in the state of Florida do not want everybody to vote. So they put obstacles in place to make it harder for us to vote. And the fact is, we just can't let them win. They can put an obstacle in place, and we're just going to overcome that obstacle. We're going to run right through it, and we're going to vote anyway.
Right. When they request a vote by mail ballot, does it come with postage?
Yes. The return envelope is a postage paid return envelope, but you do, like I mentioned earlier, you have the option to take that ballot to an early voting site. There is a drop box at the Lauderhill Mall that is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that you can go and drop your ballot at the Lauderhill office. And when I become supervisor of elections, I will expand that. So we will have more drop boxes around the county. I would love to see us have about 100 different drop boxes in different locations throughout Broward County, so that people feel more comfortable instead of sending it through the Postal Service. But let me say this about sending it through the Postal Service. most of the people who work for the Postal Service come from our community. People who are handling the vote by mail ballots in Lauderhill also come from our community. So anybody who's worried that your vote by mail ballot is going to be tossed out by somebody, that's really not a concern here in Broward County, because we are, because this is it's all us handling these things, and we don't have to worry about it. So please, I encourage everybody to vote by mail.
Thank you for that. I got two quick follow-up questions on that, Joe.
Huh?
I got two follow-up questions on that. Two things.
Okay.
One, the vote by mail, when you get it, is it available in different languages?
Yes. So currently, our ballots do have English, Spanish, and Creole, and that is going to continue. So I actually have a ballot here. So I have a few of the things. So I can show you guys what you'll get in the mail. You basically get this envelope, which I don't know if this is going to work out too well, but you get this envelope in the mail, right? And then what you have is you have your ballot, and then you have your secrecy sleeve. So when you send it back, it is still going to be a secret ballot, because the people who open the ballots and then who counts the ballots, it's different. And your ballot goes inside the secrecy sleeve. Now, one big thing that causes us a lot of problems is that on here, there's this part where you have to seal it and you have to sign it. And I need everybody, they're actually using a machine now to validate those signatures. So what's really important is that we don't mix up the envelopes. If you have a few voters in your household, make sure that the envelope you're sending back has your name on it. I think if I take down my background, it'll probably work a little better. But basically, you can see that the ballot has your name, because what often happens where these ballots get rejected is because they get the return envelopes get mixed up. So you end up signing, say, your spouse's envelope, and they sign your envelope, and then the signatures don't match. So I want everybody to kind of focus on that and make sure that you sign it. And
Joe, can you do us a favor? I don't want to put more work on you, but I think it would be a great tool if you could record that and actually post on your Facebook page. I would share that. I really would. And I would encourage everyone on here to do that, because I didn't know any of that regarding the vote by mail. So I think that'd be a great thing, man. If you made a 60-second video or something, that'd be awesome. Yeah. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I'll do that. Absolutely.
One more, and then we're going to turn to Ruby. Precincts. There's so much trickery that happens around changing of precincts last minute. So in 2018, I was in Miami at the Little Lemon City Library, which was a precinct for presidential elections. It was a precinct for early voting. It was closed on election day. And don't you know, not one, not two, hundreds of people came to that precinct on that day to vote, especially after work, not having enough time to get to another precinct. We were taking folks in our cars. It was a whole fiasco. I also supported one of my friends in Coral Springs. Last minute, precincts changed. Like what's happening with precincts? Like, is it trickery? Is it in my mind? Like, what's happening that precincts change? And why is it that if you live in a county, you can't vote wherever you want to vote?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, the real constraint has to do with being able to print off those ballots. So the difference is when you go to an early voting site, and we have 22 early voting sites throughout Broward County. So if you go to an early voting site, they can print your ballot because they have the printers available. But when you have 577 different precincts, we don't have that many printers. So we print the ballots ahead of time, and the ballots are at your precinct. Especially this year with COVID-19, I don't want anybody to wait till election day to vote. Go early, because we don't know what kind of problems they'll have, what precincts won't open because they don't have any workers. Or at the last minute, the people who own that property say, this is too dangerous. We don't want all these people coming in here. So I anticipate that there will be problems on election day, both on August 18th as well as November 3rd. Don't wait for election day. Vote by mail, vote early. One thing I think we could fix is that we need to have those early voting locations with the printers that can accept anybody. We need to keep those open on election day. And that would cause a change in the law. We would need our legislature to approve that. And right now our legislature is not interested in making it easier to vote. So, that's why we need to change our legislature. But if we did that, then it would be a lot easier for people to they can go to an early voting site even on election day and get whatever ballot. And what that does is, one big problem we have with our elections is that we don't give people the day off to vote like some other countries do. So people, it's a Tuesday and you have to go to work. So your polling place is probably not close to your job, it's close to your house. And the good thing about going early voting is that there's probably an early voting site close to your job. So you can go during your lunch hour, you can go right after work. You don't have to commute all the way back up to where you live and try to get there in time for the polling place to close. So we need to think about people who work for a living and who maybe have 2 or 3 jobs, have families, they're busy. We have to think about how we make the system work better for them. And that's why it's important to have people, there's people running against me right now who they don't work, they don't have to work. And, they don't understand these problems that working people understand. But if you get some working people to actually start running our system, then we'll start seeing some better outcomes.
Because we already know that. We know we got to pick up the prescriptions by our jobs. We can't get to the pharmacy on time.
Yeah, but we make people vote by where they live. We don't let them vote where they work. And that's, we got to fix that.
Right. Thank you so much for that. Go ahead, Nancy.
Real quickly, Joe, can you remind folks about the deadlines? You talk about early voting, but people don't know when to get their vote by mail or register by. So can you remind folks?
Yeah, so as you can see, I already have my vote by mail ballot, which means they've already been sent out. You can still go on and request your vote by mail ballot, but you should do that right now. The deadline for anybody who needs to change their registration or needs to register to vote, that deadline is July 20th. Now, they'll actually send you a vote by mail ballot if you request it by August 8th, but I don't recommend that because by then you're so close to election day that you're counting on the Postal Service to get that ballot to you and for you to turn it around within 10 days, and that's just too tight of a window. So I encourage everybody to go ahead and get their ballot now. You'll have it within the next couple of days. And unless you're registered independent, then I want to first change your registration to support the candidates you want to support, and then request your vote by mail ballot. And you have until July 20th to do that.
Thank you for that. So we did a deep dive on supervisor of elections. We're all clear. Hearts and minds are clear. We know what the role is. Thank you so much for that, Joe. We're going to turn over to Ruby. Talk about, you started to mention about like some of the disparities that we see. Talk about that a little bit more and why your role is so important.
First of all, Joe did such a great job in explaining the supervisor elections and voting and stuff like that. I just want to mention that all of our constitutional offices are up for grabs. My office, Joe's office, Harold's office, Melba's office, up for grabs. So people need to understand when we say constitutional, we're talking about our fundamental laws and our basic rights. That should make a light blow off in your head that, hey, I need to pay attention to these offices because they could have some inference as to what's going to happen in my life. So people need to understand that these are all constitutional offices. So getting on to my office, the public defender's office, we already know that in our criminal justice system, our Black and brown people, they suffer, right? Our criminal justice system serves as a mechanism in order to leave our neighborhoods under-resourced and our people over-criminalized. Let's talk about that. If I walk into court right now, I would see, if not, the majority of the box full of Black and brown people. Okay, there are sometimes I walk in and the entire box is full of them, and sometimes I walk in and maybe 93 to 95% is full of Black and brown. We already know that race plays a part in police practicing. Okay, so we need to make sure that we, develop some type of understanding with police departments as to how or what they're doing and the inherent fear that they have of Black people. That hasn't been addressed. We need to be able to address it as a people. We have issues, much like the state attorney's office and the public defender's office, when it comes to how many cases we have. We are basically borderline ineffective assistance of counsel. The Supreme Court mandates that the case count, in order for us to be effective, should be 150. We have people well over that amount. So that exceeds upon the fact that, how are people actually being represented and how can we ensure that they're getting effective assistance of counsel? And it's much like Harold and Melba said, we need to make sure that we lower that case count. we have attorneys that not only have that amount of cases, but have to be in about 4 courtrooms all at once. They have judges calling out the woodworks, asking for them to come to their courtroom when they need to be paying attention to what's going on in a particular courtroom and paying attention to what's going on with a particular client. But they can't do that. Some of our attorneys have 1 courtroom to be in. They're assigned to a division, and they are in that division. They have a certain number of cases in that division. However, they also have cases in mental health court, a 3rd-degree felony court, vet court, drug court. And all of these judges are, we want you to come here. We need you here now. We need you there now. But the clients are also saying, hey, we need you here. We need you. I need to talk to you. Can you explain this? Can you help me with this? It's burdensome on the entire system in order for them to have that many cases, in order for them to have that many courtrooms to go to. So that is an apparent issue that we have as public defenders. And not only that, but it is a high turnover rate. We have a system where public defenders are constantly turning over, right? All of our clients are getting a different public defender every single month, right? And the clients are really, suffering because of it. And it's sad. It's a sad situation to have one attorney that has, you've built a rapport with them. And then all of a sudden you have to, get a new attorney who may not know what the other attorney was talking about. The notes are there, but the notes, just because someone took note doesn't mean that you're going to actually understand what they were saying and mean what they mean, So, it just creates a system where our clients are saying, hey, this attorney isn't working for me. I get a new one every single month. How are they going to work out a deal for me? How are they going to go to trial? Because just because a case is given a different public defender doesn't mean that the judge is going to say, hey, we're going to give you more time to work on this case. No, the judge is going to say, no, that case has been with your office for however long. You're going to trial on Monday. And clients get scared about that. Because they have public defenders that don't actually know what's going on with their cases, haven't had enough time to actually sit down and go over their cases with them. Not only that, but we have lead attorneys at the public defender's office who, training is an issue. That's what I'm getting into, training. We don't have a good training system right now. We have some great public defenders, but we don't have a great training system. And we have lead attorneys that have not even had their own felony trials. You tell me how confident a client would be with going to trial and you're facing life and your attorney has never been to trial on a felony case before. How would you feel? So these are the things that our clients that are going through their minds and that are affecting our abilities in order to represent them, like they should be, like the Constitution says they should have effective assistance of counsel.
Thank you so much for that, Ruby. I like to remind folks that the folks that Ruby is talking about in terms of folks who get public defenders are often poor Black people. Let's make it plain. And the question that we're asking ourselves and the question that we're asking voters is, who should be running the office of the folks who have to defend poor Black folks? And what kind of values should they have, right? These are the questions that should be coming up to us as we're making these decisions to elect, the leadership of the public defender's office. Do we want someone who thinks that it's important to bring down the caseload? Do we want someone who we think it's important to provide training to these attorneys? I think we have to be a little bit more nuanced and to be a little bit more courageous as a community to begin to ask hard questions with our elected officials. Funny enough, I'll say right before we get to Melba and Harold, because y'all question is on fire, because we're gonna drop in an additional part of those questions. I think that previous to this, we were talking about, what a time to be a leader in this pandemic. It requires so much more. It requires folks who are strategic in their thinking, who can be innovative. What a time to be a leader. And so we're asking our community to go to the election, to go into elections, to go to the ballot box, knowing that we don't just need leaders, we need leaders who can make decisions under pressure. to be able to speak for us, that we can count on them. And we're wanting that from our elected officials, especially because of what folks are going through right now. Harold and Melba, we talked, I gave you all specific questions talking about what's happening in Miami-Dade County. Why haven't people been charged? Harold, what's going on in Broward County? I also want to kind of lay out, Melba, you really talked about what the Black Lives Matters movement is doing and what the role the state attorney has to do with that. What are y'all seeing happening? And what are the folks who are in your positions right now saying about these movements? So heavy question, but we're going to start with Melba.
Right. So the key question that you posed to me was, why is it in 27 years my opponent has never charged a police officer for an on-duty killing? That is the $1 million question. I believe it's a lack of political will. I believe it's a fear of, oh my gosh, we're going to bring this case and we're going to lose. And I think it's a bit different than an approach than how the average case is handled, right? Because the average case is, you know, Ray from around the way, you know, there's an allegation that he committed a crime. Within 24 hours, he's in custody. You know, the investigation churns on, but like he's charged in an expeditious, in a quick manner. The case may linger for a few years, but he goes to trial and ends up serving life, right? But then you look at a situation where you have a police officer for, you know, again, an on-duty killing. You may have body camera footage. You may have other cell phone footage. You may have witness testimony. You may have all of these things, more than what you see in Ray's case, right? But still, the case ends up being, well, you know, we really can't charge because the law doesn't allow us. And, you know, police officers are allowed to use force and this and that. And then, you know, the case ends up being, you know, resolved with a memo 3-4 years later saying there's nothing to see here and the officer was justified. So, you know, for me, it's about, number one, making sure the same standard applies to everyone, right? Because the standard is, can we prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt? Do we have enough evidence to show that this police officer acted in a manner that was wrongful, right? And if that evidence exists, then you need to file the case. You can't create another burden that doesn't exist, which is, well, are we going to win? Because you go into a case, you don't know if you're going to win, right? You don't. All you know is, I have this evidence, you know, I can check off every element of the crime, right? Because every crime is elements. You have to be able to prove these 2 or 3 or 4 things in order to get a guilty verdict, right? But sometimes you go to trial and the jury hates your victim, your surviving witness, right? Or they may, you know, sympathize with the defendant, or they may hate you. You know, you never know what necessarily goes through a jury's head. So you can't make a filing decision based on, you know, am I going to win? Because unless you have a crystal ball and you can pick the lotto numbers, right? And if that's the case, you're probably not going to be a prosecutor. But, you know, at the end of the day, you don't know what the outcome is going to be. So you have to really focus on what's on the front end. So because of the fact that my opponent has not had the political will to really move forward in these cases, there has been a lack of justice here in Miami-Dade County. And I will point very clearly to the case of Darren Rainey, who was an African-American man who was in custody here in Miami-Dade County for a cocaine possession charge. Bigger problem because, you know, at the end of the day, why was he serving a 3-year prison sentence for possession of narcotics, right? That to me is not justice. But he had schizophrenia. He had an episode in the prison, and the prison guards locked him in a scalding hot shower, a shower that ranged between 160 and 180 degrees in temperature. He was locked in there for 2 hours as he was screaming and begging for his life, and then he eventually died. My opponent never filed charges in that case, even though there was video evidence, even though there was testimony from the other people incarcerated as to what happened, even though there were staff members who were willing to testify in this case. My opponent never filed charges. So Darren Rainey's family never got justice from the criminal justice system here in Miami-Dade County. And those officers to this day, 8 years later, still have not been held accountable for their actions. And this sends a very clear sign to the community whose lives matter and who doesn't. So, you know, at the end of the day, it's time for real accountability. It's time for real change. I intend to bring that change and to be aggressive. Again, this is not a witch hunt. This is not about, you know, trying to jam up people who didn't do anything wrong. But if the facts are there, we can't be afraid we have to make bold moves, make bold decisions to be able to bring justice and equality and equity to the people of our county.
Thank you so much for that, Melba. I think that's really helpful for folks to understand about the case. Mr. Rainey, a lot of us heard of it. I think people get really confused on when can folks be charged? What does it mean for folks to be charged? I think clearing up, like, we're not saying this is going to win, but we're saying, let's take it to trial. Let's see what happens. So that was really informative. I'm going to turn to Harold. What's happening in Broward County? What are you hearing from the current state attorney about what's happening around BLM, around what Black people are frustrated with in terms of this system?
Yeah, and I want to touch on that. I just want to piggyback off of what Melba went into. The term that I know Melba is probably familiar with, and I know Ruby is probably familiar with, is when you read those memorandums, when you decide to drop a case, it says, we decide to drop this case because there's no reasonable likelihood of conviction, right? That is the term that they try to use, right? And it's crazy that you see that that's a trend whenever a law enforcement officer is involved. That's almost always going to be the explanation as to why they're not going to bring charges against law enforcement officers or members from the law enforcement agency, because they've convinced themselves, or they believe because of the blue shield or because they have a badge on, is that there's no reasonable likelihood of conviction. Was because you choose not to bring charges, right? That goes to the point that I want to go to, is grand juries. And to answer your question directly, Sandra, the current state attorney right now, I will say that he has sporadically throughout his 40 years, but in the latter part of his term, he has brought charges against law enforcement officers, but it took him some time to do it. And one of the problems is that I think his office chooses to submit almost all those cases to grand juries. I totally disagree with that. I truly believe that.
What does it mean, taking it to grand jury?
Right. So grand jury is getting a panel of about 12 citizens, and you're bringing them and you're presenting evidence to them to actually indict or bring charges against an individual, right? And so it's one of the privileges or discretionary functions or powers that a state attorney has. You could bring a grand jury for anything. You could bring a grand jury for issues that affect a particular county and you want answers to it. You can actually present that before a grand jury. A lot of people don't know about that. You would, by Florida statute, for capital offenses, so for crimes that could potentially be punishable by death, you have to submit that case to a grand jury. That's irrespective if it's Joe Schmo on the street or law enforcement officer with the badge on. If it's something that's going to involve death or something of that particular nature, you have to submit that to a grand jury. But what this current state attorney has chosen to do in Broward County, what many state attorneys throughout the country, what we saw in Ferguson, what we saw in other jurisdictions around the country, whenever a law enforcement officer commits a crime or misconduct or an act or a bad act, they choose to send those to grand juries. And that's even less than first-degree murder, because you have to for first-degree murder. But anything less than that, they choose to submit that to a grand jury. But we all know if any one of us committed those crimes, they're making a filing decision immediately. They're going to indict us on the spot. We're going to be arrested and we're going to be put into custody. We saw that.
Pause, Harold, pause. So two options. Yeah. I think that's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
So you got the option to go to the grand jury, or you get the option to get charged immediately.
Right. And we saw that. Yeah. And we saw that play out in Georgia with Ahmaud Arbery, right? Those gentlemen that killed Ahmaud Arbery, they should have been in custody immediately. But because of their past employment, or the son, I believe, who currently was still a law enforcement agent or officer, and the father, who was a retired law enforcement officer, they received the privilege of, hey, they assumed it was self-defense. They agreed with their story. But we know if it was a Black or brown individual, they would have been arrested and they would have figured it out later on, right? They would have been in custody for 30 days or however long until they made their decision to file charges. That's the gross inequities that we're talking about in the criminal justice system. There's a term that I know that Melba is familiar with, and I know that Ruby is familiar with, and it's often said in legal jargon and legal circles regarding grand juries. A prosecutor can indict a ham sandwich. It said that a prosecutor can indict a ham sandwich, essentially say that a prosecutor can indict anything. In that particular process, a prosecutor, it's not a real adversarial process where there's back and forth. A public defender or a state attorney is going back and forth and presenting evidence. That is truly a prosecutor's show. You're using everything within your power, all the evidence that you have, to present evidence before a grand jury to bring charges against this potential individual. This is an advantageous process for a prosecutor. So that's why it's saying that, and a prosecutor can indict a ham sandwich if they choose, because you control the evidence, you control what's going before the grand jury and the presiding judge. But the issue what we've noticed in the United States, in this country, and in the state of Florida, whenever a law enforcement officer involved, prosecutors are approaching it haphazardly. They're not approaching it as vigorously if it was a black defendant or a regular Joe Schmo. And so that's something that I want to change. Anything absent first degree murder, and if it's involving a law enforcement officer, we're not submitting those to a grand jury. I want the process to be open and transparent. I want to be held accountable. Isn't that crazy? A guy running for office is saying that he wants to be held accountable. So the moment that I decide to bring charges against a law enforcement officer, I want the law enforcement agencies and the police unions to come to me. They'll be open and transparent, and they'll see, Harold, you made this determination to bring charges against our law enforcement brother and sister. Why? And I'll tell them why, because it'll be based on sound, legal, logic, and reasoning. But the moment I decide not to bring charges against a law enforcement officer, I want to be held accountable to you, to the community. So you can actually look at the evidence that I presented and decided to bring charges against this, or not to bring charges against this individual. And I have to answer to you, the community. That's how it should be. We all know that grand juries, and I want to make it clear, the reason why it's important to me to have it open and transparent, evidence that's presented before a grand jury is sealed. You cannot share that information to the public. And so that's why prosecutors throughout the country have strategically decided to present those type of cases to the grand juries to protect our law enforcement brother and sisters, right? And so I want to move away from a sealed process where we're keeping that information from the public. I want an open and transparent process to where me and my subordinates, the Office of the State Attorney, ran by Harold Pryor, the buck stops with me, that I'm being held accountable by everyone. And I think that's the way we restore trust. That's the way we restore accountability in the criminal justice system.
Oh man, y'all, we're at 3:23. Nancy, take us away. We gotta figure out how to wrap this up, but this has been so informative. Nancy.
Absolutely. It's been so great listening to all of you share your insight about your roles and what you plan on doing. But I've heard a reoccurring theme, and so has folks in the chat, about accountability. And in your roles, you want to implement change, but can you also craft policy? And a lot of folks want to understand, if that is possible, what policies exactly would you be able to craft? And let's start with Ruby.
And a lot of people get confused when I talk about making sure that I advocate for criminal justice reform. It doesn't mean that I'm going to actually be able to make the law, right? Me saying that I want to advocate is me actually going to Tallahassee and advocating on behalf of my office to say that these are the laws that we want to be changed. We can get together with other members of the community as well, and also our legislatures, such as state reps, and we can talk about bills and stuff with them. Those are the things that I'm talking about. I'm not talking about me actually being able, and I know the prosecutors, they can't also make sure they make the laws, right? That's not something that we do. But I am going to be making sure that we advocate for funding. Our office needs funding. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's one of the issues that we have when we talk about keeping our experienced attorneys and keeping staff employed at the office, and them not being overworked by having to work at the public defender's office and then a night job, I think is ludicrous. We need to have somebody advocating, because all we got was emails. We got an email a few months ago saying that Carlos Martinez, which is a public defender in Miami-Dade County, he went to Tallahassee to advocate for his people to get more funds. All we got is email. Is our people going to eat the email, or are they going to eat off of that? Like, tell me why we just got an email and you didn't take your butt up to Tallahassee and advocate on our behalf. They need someone in that office that's going to do that. And I'm going to be that advocate. As I stated before, I'm the only person in my race that's actually already advocating. I was in trial to the last moment that the courthouse was open here in Broward County in March. I'm the only person that's actually in the courtrooms. None of my other opponents have tried a case in well over 2 decades, and that's a problem. We need an advocate, you know, not only just someone with managerial experience, which I do have. You know, a lot of people want to talk about my age, and, you know, age isn't something that, you know, it's bothering me in this campaign, because I know that I have the experience. Currently, I'm the president of Broward Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. I've been a past president of TJ Reddick Bar Association. So I've ran huge organizations. I've also been a chief at the office and a supervisor. I was a chief prior to the age of 30 at the public defender's office. If you didn't think that I could run, you know, a county court, you know, and you know, that's crazy that now, you know, people want to talk about age. And, you know, it's really about how you are, you know, in your managerial skills and what you bring to the table. And I bring a lot. I bring the most experience as far as the ballot concerned. And I'm going to be promoting criminal justice reform. I'm going to be talking to our state reps about making sure that we challenge mandatory minimums, making sure, like, a lot of people don't understand that we as taxpayers, we pay $146 per day per person that's sitting in the Broward County Jail. And that includes someone who's sitting in jail on a $25 bond, such as trespassing for sleeping on the park bench. That's counterproductive. We don't need situations like that. We don't need a public defender that's going to be in denial and say, hey, no, our office is going great right now. You know, we just need to change a little bit here and there. And no, the system has proven time and time again that we have systematically contributed to what's happening with our Black and brown folks. And that's a problem. Our criminal justice system needs somebody that's going to advocate for them, that's going to make sure that we have the funding, such as for substance abuse treatment programs, mental health programs, jobs, schools, housing. These are all the things that our clients need to, you know, for them to refrain from creating that revolving door, as I talked about earlier, you know, them going in and out of the system because of jobs, not having a job, because they don't have housing. You know, we're punishing people of poor because of, you know, institutionalized reasons of poor, and, you know, them not being able to, you know, them being homeless.
Right. Thank you so much, Ruby. Nancy, I want to build upon your questions because we're at 3:28. And so I want to ask folks are talking about transparency, accountability, transparency, but there's also, as we ask you all to give kind of like final comments, there's a push for folks to get out the vote. And this is the purpose of what we're doing. We've named this series Not Voté, meaning in Haitian Creole, we're voting. What will you say in your closing thoughts? I know Nancy mentioned transparency, accountability. We're gonna give people like 2-3 minutes, run through it. But tell folks what's on the line. Why should they vote? Why is it their duty to vote to make sure that our democracy works? And then Nancy and I'll come back to kind of close folks out. So we're gonna go to Joe, followed by Harold, and Melba's gonna close us out. So go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, so you know, everybody's motivated about the criminal justice system. Know this: the criminal justice system is on your ballot August 18th. You know, by November 3rd, it's already going to be wrapped up. We need you to vote on August 18th, and we need your voice. You know, besides the criminal justice system, our ability to make sure that we increase our voter participation here in Broward County is on the line. If we have the wrong person as our supervisor of elections, somebody who isn't going to focus on raising the voter turnout in our communities, we're not going to see things change the way we need to see things change. Because elected officials, trust me, they pay attention to voters. So if a certain community votes at a higher rate than another community, guess which community gets the most attention? The one with the most voters. So we need to be that community that has the most voters so that we get the most attention.
Thank you for that. Harold.
Yes, thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Avante Ensemble, for having us and for sharing this platform. Look, like I've said so many times, and I can't stress it enough, we are truly in a race for the soul and consciousness of Broward County. If you're concerned about law enforcement, it's on the ballot. If you're concerned about criminal justice reform, it's on the ballot. If you're concerned about your health and safety, it's on the ballot. If you're concerned about the health and safety and education of your children, that's on the ballot. Right. This is an important race. If you're concerned about your son, your daughter, your Black child, it's on the ballot, like me. You You know, I'm running for state attorney because, quite frankly, I've experienced the hell of the criminal justice system from the day I was born all the way up until now. I've had those interactions with law enforcement officers, not knowing what was going to happen. And I know that my son, my 2-year-old son, he's going to experience that at some point in his life. I'm running because we have a criminal justice system that has been traditionally stacked against people of color and poor people, and it's time to reform the system. I don't care who you are. I don't care what walk of life, your race, color, creed. If you were born in Haiti, if you were born in Jamaica like my wife, or if you're born on the west coast of Florida like myself, we all want safer communities. We all want it. But we all want a criminal justice system that is equitable and just for all people. I'm running to initiate ground level criminal justice reform without compromising the safety of our communities. What does that mean? That means us holding police accountable. That means us ending the racial sentencing disparities. That means us eradicating the school to prison pipeline. That means us holding elected officials accountable, prosecuting them for violating our trust, prosecuting them for violating the laws of Florida. It means us protecting our immigrant population, which hasn't been protected in the criminal justice system. It means fully allowing them to understand the consequences of pleading not a case and how that could affect their immigration status. Not and fully letting them understand that just because there's a language barrier, just because your native language is Spanish or Creole, right? You should feel comfortable to come to a state attorney's office if you're being abused, if you're the victim of a crime, and understand that we're going to have people there that can communicate with you, that can speak the language, that is going to look out for your interests, and that's going to vigorously fight for you like anyone else. The beautiful thing about this country is, doesn't matter where you grew up, if you're a citizen or a non-citizen, you're afforded the same constitutional rights as little Harold Pryor, who was born here in Florida, or the white man or white woman that grew up right down the street from where I'm at right now. We all are afforded the same constitutional rights, and it's time for us to have elected officials that understand that. It's important for us to have elected officials who won't serve as a law enforcement arm of the Donald J. Trump administration or ICE. It's important for us to actually pay attention to the local issues and protect all citizens. And so I'm running because I truly believe we need justice, fairness, and equality restored into our criminal justice system. And we need to change this system. We need to radically change it. And I truly believe that I am the person for that job. If you want to learn more about me, learn more about my platform and why I'm running, please check out my website, haroldpryor.com. Learn how you can join the movement. We have an opportunity to elect the first Black state attorney in history in Broward County, the first Black public defender in Broward County, and also in Miami-Dade with the state attorney. And so we need everyone to get out the vote. We need all hands on deck. You have the power in your hand to effectuate real change, and this is that opportunity. There's a lot on the line. Like I said, we are in a race for the soul and consciousness of South Florida. Let's be about the business. Thank you. I'm Harold Pryor, running for state attorney. Let's make history. Thank you all.
Oh man, Harold. We're gonna come back to that. Melba, close us out, and we're gonna give an opportunity while Melba is going. If all the candidates could drop their information in the live, I want to remind folks, while we love these folks, we cannot, as an organization, endorse folks yet, but we're gonna share our platforms with people who look like us, who can educate us on what these positions do. Melba, take us home, and then drop your information in the actual Facebook Live as well, so that folks can find you all. Go ahead, Melba.
Awesome. So it is Sunday. So I will loosely quote scripture and say, faith without works is dead, right? So when you look at the situation of we're out here protesting and we're angry and raising our voices around these issues, protesting in the street is great, but you've got to take it to the ballot box, right? Because if we don't vote for elected officials who reflect our values, we're going to keep seeing more of the same. In Miami-Dade County, we have the unique opportunity to be able to make radical, positive change in our criminal justice system. We've seen what the last 27 years have brought us. It has not brought us accountability. It has not brought us racial equity. It has brought us Reagan era failed policies that we don't work and that destroy our communities. So if you're about ending the criminalization of poverty, if you're about having children being treated as children and not being prosecuted as adults, if you want to see law enforcement be held accountable for harming our community when they do, if you want to see corrupt elected officials actually be held accountable rather than actions be swept under the rug, if you want to see true transparency and be able to hold, excuse me, your elected official accountable, I'm your person. I am never going to duck and cover from you. So if you have a question, if you want to know why I did a particular action, you will be able to have access to me. I intend to create a civil rights unit so that we can address hate crimes, so that we can have specialists who will deal with police shootings, police misconduct, will deal with conviction integrity, looking back at old cases to make sure injustices didn't happen, and if they did, correcting them. It is time for real change here in Miami-Dade County. It is time for a new day and a new state attorney. So elect me on August 18th, vote early, vote by mail, preferably, but definitely vote. Learn more about me at www.melbaformiami.com, Melba, F-O-R, Miami.com. I'm number 24 on the ballot. And when I win on August 18th, I will be the first African-American to ever hold this position in Miami-Dade County history, and the first Caribbean-American in Florida history to hold this position. But it's not even about that. It's just about the fact that I'm qualified, I have a history of leading, and I have a history of serving this community, and I want to continue to do that as your state attorney. So thank you.
Thank you, Melba. And I want to remind folks, when you talk about the ACLU have been holding us down for a long time and have held us down throughout a lot of bad legislation that have could have come against us. So Nancy, I don't know if there are any quick things you want to say. We're over by 7, but folks to be graceful and give us 3 minutes so we can end at 40.
I would be remiss if I didn't say 2 or 3 words in Creole, because nous c'est avancer ensemble. Pour tout le monde qui était branché avec nous aujourd'hui, nous apprécions ça. Nous dit nous comme ça pour nous voter le 18 août, qui est très important, nous tous à voter. Pour tout le monde là, à faire recherche nous, make sure nous allons voter. Et puis, remember, request your vote by mail ballots if you can't. And if you have any questions, check the live and check out their information in there. And then be sure to bring folks with you to vote. Assist your elders. Nous connaissons notre communauté par nous. Grand pile monde qui pas connaît anglais, aider yo, assister yo. So don't forget.
Joa pour nous capable gain un deadline pour nous capable enregistrer pour nous voter, c'est 20 juillet. So 20 juillet, c'est dernière date pour nous capable enregistrer pour nous capable voter en août. Même Jean Harold t'a dit, tout bagay que nous pensons qui est important pour la vie, yo tout sous not voté yo. So everything that is important to us, our healthcare, immigration, our gender, everything is on the ballot. August and in November, we're voting for our lives. Harold said it, Melba said it, Joe said it, Ruby said it. We're voting for our lives. We're voting not only for us, especially for folks who are immigrant populations. We're voting for folks who can't vote. So I'm not only voting for me, I'm voting for all the ones who are here, who are paying taxes, that don't have the ability to vote. So I'm thinking about my entire community and what's right and what's beneficial for them. Thank you all so much from the bottom of our hearts for spending your Sunday with us, for informing our community with all this great information. We don't take it for granted that people may just not know. We are so privileged that we run in these spaces, that we get to have all these intellectual conversations all the time. But everyday people want to better understand, and they should have a platform where they can really understand and ask questions. And we want to be for the people, because that's who we are. Anyone who's looking to be more engaged, want to understand better, please check out Avancer Ensemble. You don't have to be Haitian. If you're lovers of Haitian culture, Bon Pese, Haitian music, you could be our friends, you could be our family. And Avancer Ensemble from day one have always said, we will never be for the line and for the for the headlights. We will always be an organization that is truly committed to the masses, to the people, to the poor, to the folks who've been forgotten about. That's who we care about. And we're knowing that we want to share our platforms with people that you all, who, while you are running, we know it's hard. We want to share our platforms with folks who can educate our community. We appreciate you all. Thanks for everyone on the lives. Continue to share the live. A lot of folks had questions. This was amazing. I learned a lot, and I'm sure our community too. Forever grateful. And if I'm saying something can be of any service to you all, please let us know. Thank you, Nancy. And Nancy's running in Coral Springs. Check her out.
Yes. Go Nancy.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Everybody have a good day.